The battlefield still smoked under the evening sky. Bodies of both humans and aliens lay scattered across the ruins. Commander Jace moved slowly through the wreckage, his boots crunching broken metal and ash. He had seen too many wars, too many lies, and too many enemies pretending to be monsters. But what he found that day would change everything. From behind a collapsed wall, he heard a soft, broken voice. "Please, have mercy." Jace raised his rifle, aiming into the shadows. "Who's there?" he asked sharply. Silence followed, then a weak cough. He stepped closer and pushed aside a beam, and that's when he saw her. An alien woman, tall, silver-skinned. Her armor torn, chains wrapped around her arms and legs, but her eyes, golden and glowing, even in pain, stared straight at him. She didn't look angry or wild or proud. She looked defeated. "Don't give me to them," she whispered, her voice dry and trembling. Jace didn't understand. "You're a prisoner," he said. "One of the enemy. Your side killed my men." "I didn't fight," she said, lowering her head. "I was taken too. Betrayed by my own." Jace looked around, making sure no one was watching. He knelt beside her, still gripping his rifle tightly. "Why should I trust you?" The alien woman met his eyes, tears forming in her golden gaze. "I'll give you something no one else can," she said slowly. "Strong children, powerful blood. A bond that lasts forever." Jace blinked, confused, unsure if he had heard right. "Don't want, you don't understand," she cut in softly. "My kind. We were made for war, created to carry the strength of many worlds." She coughed again, her body shaking. "I am the last. If they take me, they will breed me like cattle, break me again and again." Her voice cracked. "But if you take me, I'll choose you." Jace stared at her, trying to see the trick, the game, the trap. But there was none. She wasn't lying. She wasn't begging like a criminal. She was surrendering with dignity. "Who are you?" he asked after a moment. "My name is Kalira," she said, "and I have nothing left except my life." The chain around her wrist sparked. It was a shock chain, made to control her with pain. Jace reached out and touched it, feeling the low hum of electricity. "Why would you trust a human?" he asked. "Why would you think I'd protect you?" She gave a tired smile. "Because you're the only one who looked at me. Not like a weapon, but like a person." Jace took a deep breath, looked back toward the human camp, then at the broken woman in front of him. He should call for backup. Report her, follow orders, but something inside him refused, something human. He pulled a cloak from his pack and covered her body. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tried, but her legs were weak and bloody. "I'll carry you then," he said firmly. Kalira didn't argue. As he lifted her into his arms, her body trembled. But she said no words. Jace moved fast, staying away from cameras, sticking to shadowed paths. The ship bay was quiet when he arrived. He loaded her into his small private transport, hiding her behind tool crates and old supply boxes. Just before locking the cargo door, he paused. Kalira looked at him with tired but grateful eyes. "I won't forget this," she whispered. Jace didn't speak, just gave her a nod and shut the hatch. As he entered the pilot seat and prepared for launch, he heard the command tower's voice through the radio. "All ships, prepare for prisoner scans. An enemy female has escaped, dangerous and unpredictable." Jace's heart pounded. He looked back at the storage bay, then at the flight controls. He pressed launch. The ship rose into the sky, heading for orbit, and with it, a secret neither side could ever know. He didn't understand why he saved her, but he knew this Kalira's story wasn't over, and neither was his. The ship hummed quietly as it drifted through orbit, stars shining like frozen sparks around it. Commander Jace sat alone in the cockpit, his fingers resting on the controls, eyes watching the radar screen. His heart had not slowed since the launch. He kept hearing that voice from the radio repeating over and over, "All ships must report for inspection. One enemy female has escaped capture. Extreme caution advised, down below." Hidden beneath old supply crates in the ship's rear hold, Kalira waited in silence. Jace hadn't spoken to her since takeoff. He couldn't. He was still trying to understand what he had done. Breaking military law, hiding an enemy, betraying. Everything he was trained to follow, and yet, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like something else. A soft beep broke the silence. "Unidentified vessel," came the voice from command. "Prepare for docking inspection." Jace's stomach dropped. They were serious, faster than he expected. His eyes shifted to the storage bay camera feed, showing Kalira curled up, breathing slow, eyes half closed. He switched off the camera, his jaw tight. This was it. He flipped on the comms, trying to sound calm. "Copy that. Beginning docking protocol," he replied. His fingers moved fast. Rerouting power, locking storage sections with emergency codes, adding false logs to his manifest. He had one chance to fool them. The docking arms clamped to his ship with a hiss, and 2 officers stepped aboard minutes later. "Routine check, nothing personal," one of them said, scanning the hallway. Jace nodded, stepping aside. They looked through compartments, opened panels, scanned air particles, checked logs. The second officer stopped at the locked rear storage door. "What's back there?" he asked. "Damaged cargo crates, dangerous pressure leaks," Jace answered quickly. "That's why it's sealed." The officer frowned and scanned the panel anyway. Jace felt sweat crawl down his neck. The scanner blinked yellow, then green. "Too risky to open, I see it," the officer muttered. "All right, everything looks fine. Strange for a solo pilot out here, though." Jace gave a fake laugh. "Wanted quiet time. Didn't expect an inspection squad." The 2 officers left without more questions. The docking arms released, and the ship was free again. Only then did Jace breathe. He walked quietly to the rear hold and unlocked it. Kalira sat up slowly, blinking, her golden eyes meeting his. "You didn't give me away," she said quietly. "I almost did," Jace replied, honest. "But you didn't," she said, her voice firmer this time. "No," he said, "I didn't." She nodded once, then looked down at the bruises on her arms, touching one carefully. "Why would your own kind betray you?" he asked after a long pause. Kalira took a slow breath. "Because I refused them." "Refused what?" "To be a tool," she whispered. "They wanted to use my body for breeding soldiers. I said no, so they gave me to your people instead." Jace sat down across from her, stunned. "You weren't captured in battle?" "No," she said. "I was sold." A cold silence hung between them. Jace had always believed the enemy was fierce, dangerous, merciless, but this woman, she was something else entirely. "I don't understand," he finally said. "Why tell me all this?" "Because I want you to see the truth," she answered. "Not just about me, but about the war." He looked into her eyes, golden like firelight in the dark hold, and something shifted inside him. For a brief second, she wasn't an alien or a prisoner. She was just someone trying to survive. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared through the ship. A new signal on the radar, fast and direct. A small fighter, no ID code, weapons armed, coming straight at them. "Someone followed us," Jace said, jumping to the controls. Kalira stood beside him, her body tense. "Not someone," she said, her voice like steel. "Them." The ones who sold her had found her again, and this time, they weren't planning to take her alive. The ship shook with each blast as red lights flashed across the control panel. Jace gripped the handles, trying to keep the ship steady, while Kalira stood behind him, her hands clenched tight. The enemy fighter was smaller, faster, and full of hatred. But Kalira wasn't afraid. She had faced worse than death. The ship took a sharp hit on the side, and the lights flickered. "We can't outrun them," Jace shouted. "We'll burn out in atmosphere." Kalira stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "Then stop running," she said calmly. "Let me do something." Jace looked at her. "What can you do against a fighter ship?" Kalira didn't answer. She pressed her hand to the metal wall and closed her eyes. At first, nothing happened. Then the ship trembled, but not from enemy fire. The panels around her began to flicker with strange blue light, Symbols, alien and ancient, floated over her skin like mist. The ship's damaged systems came back online. Engines hissed with renewed life, and shields surged to full power. Jace stared at her in shock. "What are you?" he whispered. Kalira opened her eyes. "More than I was allowed to be." The enemy fighter tried to fire again, but this time, Jace fired first, using a short pulse that blasted it into debris. It was over in seconds. The ship floated in silence. No more alarms, just deep breaths and disbelief. Kalira sank to the floor, her body shaking, her glow fading. Jace knelt beside her, catching her before she collapsed. "You saved us," he said softly. She gave a weak smile. "That's twice. Now, I'm keeping score." He carried her to the medbed and checked her vitals. Though he wasn't sure human tools could read alien life properly, her body temperature was rising fast, her skin hot to the touch. "Kalira, what's happening to you?" "It's the bond," she whispered. "I opened the ship's memory with my blood, but it burns me now. It needs balance." "What does that mean?" She touched his wrist gently. "Connection, closeness, the link must be shared." Jace didn't fully understand, but he sat by her side, letting her hold his hand slowly. The heat eased from her skin, and her breathing calmed. She didn't speak for a long time, just rested against him. Jace watched her face, realizing he didn't feel fear anymore. He felt something else, something new. Not duty, not guilt. It was something quiet and steady, trust. Later, when she woke again, they sat together by the window, watching stars drift past. Kalira told him about her world before it was ruined. She spoke of cold mountains, of singing winds, and how her people once loved deeply, even in war. "We were built to fight," she said. "But not to be alone." Jace nodded slowly. "That's true for humans too." She leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're strange, human," she said with a small smile. "Kindness in a world full of cruelty. You're not what I expected either," he replied. "I thought you'd be like the others." "Full of rage, I was," she whispered, "until you looked at me and didn't flinch." A quiet moment passed, peaceful, rare, and real. Then the ship's computer beeped again, showing a star chart, a new planet nearby, unmarked and isolated. Might be safe, it might be a trap, but they had to land and rest as Jace set the course. Kalira stood behind him. "If I die," she said, "you must not mourn me, only remember that someone like me existed." Jace turned to her, his voice steady. "You're not dying, Kalira," he said. "You're coming back with me, even if the whole galaxy stands in our way." She smiled again, but this time it wasn't sad. It was full of something stronger, hope. As the ship glided toward the dark green world below, both knew their bond had begun, not just by blood or survival, but by choice, and that choice would be tested soon. More than either of them was ready for. The jungle air was heavy, thick with heat and strange sounds. Jace moved through the tall trees, his rifle raised, his boots sinking into soft moss that glowed faintly beneath his feet. The ship had crash-landed just hours ago, the engine smoking, systems dead, and nightfall creeping in fast. Behind him, Kalira walked slowly, her body still weak, but her eyes sharp, glowing like twin embers in the growing dark. "This place feels wrong," Jace muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Like it's watching us." Kalira stopped, her fingers brushing the bark of a black tree. "It is," she said quietly. "This world is not empty. It remembers pain." Jace turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer, only knelt beside the roots and pressed her palm to the soil. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then a soft hum echoed through the jungle, like voices whispering far below the ground. Kalira pulled back, her face pale. "This world was once a prison," she said. "My people. They used to leave traitors here." Before Jace could ask more, the jungle screamed, not with sound, but with motion, trees twisting, leaves curling inward. As if something had been disturbed, Jace raised his weapon, scanning the shadows. A shape moved between the trees, fast, tall, and not human. Kalira grabbed his arm. "Run, it's one of them." They sprinted through the thick vines and glowing plants, dodging low branches. Kalira barely keeping up. Behind them, the creature followed, silent and smooth, never making a sound. Jace spotted an old ruin ahead, collapsed stone gate covered in moss, half buried in roots. "This way," he said, pulling her inside. They hid behind the broken wall, breathing hard. The creature stepped into the moonlight, revealing a twisted version of Kalira's kind, bigger, bulkier, its body marked with scars and glowing veins. Its eyes were dead white, like it had forgotten what life meant. Kalira stared at it with horror. "That was one of my brothers," she whispered, "before the breeding pits changed him." Jace looked at her, stunned. "They did this to their own?" Kalira nodded slowly. "This is what I was running from. This is what they wanted to turn me into." The creature sniffed the air and moved closer. Sensing something, Jace raised his weapon again, but Kalira touched his hand. "No," she said. "It's already dead inside. It only knows pain." The creature turned its head, then slowly walked away, disappearing into the jungle like a ghost. They waited until the night grew quiet again, the danger passing like a bad dream. Back at the wrecked ship, they lit a small fire from broken cables and sat under the stars. Kalira wrapped herself in a thermal blanket, her face full of sorrow. "I thought I could forget what they did," she said softly, "but even here, they follow me." Jace placed a small ration bar in her hand, his voice low. "You're not them," he said. "You didn't give in." She looked at him, eyes shining in the firelight. "You believe in me more than I do," she said, almost like it was a question. "I do," he replied without hesitation. She smiled faintly, then leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Thank you, human," she whispered, "for not being like the others." Jace didn't speak, just sat with her in the silence, letting the fire crackle between them. But far away, in the deep of space, a signal pulsed from the wrecked ship's emergency beacon, and somewhere, someone answered. They were not alone for long, and the next visitor would not be kind. The wind shifted. It came suddenly, cold and sharp, slicing through the jungle like a warning. Jace opened his eyes, his hand already reaching for the rifle beside him. Kalira was already awake, standing barefoot on a rock, her hair drifting in the wind, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. She wasn't speaking, just listening. Jace stood beside her, scanning the dark horizon. "What is it?" he whispered. She didn't answer right away, then finally said, "Voices, old ones." Jace frowned. "I don't hear anything. You weren't meant to," Kalira replied. "They're calling to me." The jungle parted slowly as if something unseen moved through it. Not loud, not violent, but purposeful. Kalira stepped forward, walking slowly through the undergrowth, her hands brushing past the plants like she'd walked this path before. Jace followed, confused and tense, his grip on the rifle tight. They came upon a clearing where the trees bent inward like they were bowing, and at the center was a stone platform, covered in ancient symbols. Kalira froze, her breath catching in her throat. "This place," she whispered. "This is where my mother died." Jace lowered his weapon, heart sinking. Kalira stepped onto the stone, her feet glowing slightly as if the ground remembered her blood. Images flickered in the air above her, holograms without tech, memories without machines. Jace saw it, clear as day, a younger Kalira kneeling as warriors circled her, chains in hand, her mother shouting in defiance. Standing between them, then light, then screams, then nothing. Kalira fell to her knees, breathing hard. "I was just a girl," she said, "and they made me forget it." Jace sat beside her, not saying a word, just letting her speak. "They told me love was weakness, that mercy was death." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "But you confuse me." "How?" Jace asked gently. "You protect without force, you speak without cruelty, and yet you've survived. He shrugged. Maybe it's not confusion, maybe it's just choice. She looked at him for a long moment, then leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. I feel safe with you, she whispered. And I haven't felt safe since I was a child. Just then, a high-pitched tone echoed in the distance, mechanical, sharp, unnatural. Kalira stood, eyes wide. They're here, she said. Ones who sent the hunter before, they found us. Jace stood too, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. Kalira grabbed his hand, her grip firm. We can't fight them here. This place is sacred. Then where do we go? Kalira turned to the stone platform and pressed her hand against it. A hidden door opened beneath them with a loud hiss, revealing a tunnel. We go down, she said, to where the old power sleeps. They descended into the ground as the wind above roared louder. Once below, the door sealed behind them, casting them into soft blue light from glowing crystals along the walls. The tunnel opened into a chamber filled with strange machines, long abandoned and half buried in dust and roots. Kalira walked among them like someone returning home. These are from before the wars, she said. Technology older than my race. She touched one machine gently, and it lit up with pulsing lines. Jace watched as her fingers moved across the controls like instinct. What is this? He asked. She looked at him and whispered, a forge, not for weapons, but for blood. Before he could speak, something above began pounding on the surface, metal and claw, searching for them. They're not giving up, Jace said, raising his weapon again. Kalira stepped forward and took his hand, guiding it to the glowing panel. Then let's show them what mercy becomes when it learns to fight. The machine hummed, bright light wrapped around them both, and the chamber came alive, and outside, in the jungle, the enemies paused, sensing something shift in the ground, something ancient, something angry, something awakened. The ground pulsed. The trees above groaned as if the planet itself had taken a breath. Inside the ancient chamber, Kalira stood still, her body surrounded by blue light. The machine was old, older than her memory, but it responded to her as if it had been waiting. Jace could barely keep his eyes open. The light was too bright, but he didn't move away. Kalira's hand was still holding his, her fingers warm and steady. You need to let go, she said gently. He looked at her, confused. Why? Because this will change me, she whispered. And I don't know what I'll become. Jace didn't let go. I trust you, he said quietly. Whatever happens. She looked at him for a moment, then closed her eyes. The machine flared to life, energy surging through her, wrapping around her body like armor made of light. Her scars faded, her skin shimmered, and something deep inside her, something broken, began to heal. The pounding above grew louder, claws scraping at the stone, voices screaming in a strange, twisted language. Kalira opened her eyes, and for the first time, Jace saw her not as a prisoner, not as a victim, but as a queen, a warrior reborn. They're here, Jace said, aiming his rifle toward the sealed ceiling. Kalira raised her hand and the wall behind them slid open, revealing a new path leading upward. They ran, the air growing hot with pressure as the old forge behind them began to collapse. They emerged on the surface just as a dark ship descended through the sky, its engines roaring like thunder. From the ship, armored creatures stepped out, heavily built, emotionless, with glowing red eyes. One of them stepped forward, its voice harsh. Return the female, and you may leave alive. Kalira stepped in front of Jace, her voice calm but sharp. I am no one's property. The creature tilted its head, then raised a weapon. But before it could fire, Kalira moved in. One blink, she closed the distance, her hands glowing with energy drawn from the forge. She struck the ground, and the shockwave knocked the enemy backward like leaves in a storm. Jace stood frozen, watching as Kalira faced them alone. She wasn't just stronger. She was faster, smarter, filled with something ancient. The red-eyed soldiers regrouped, circling her, but she didn't back down. You came to cage me, she said, her voice echoing across the trees. Now feel the rage of the forgotten. She leapt into the center, striking with grace and fury, her every move fluid like a storm with a purpose. Jace ran in to help, firing at any that got too close. One of the soldiers aimed at him, but Kalira blocked the blast with her arm, the energy bouncing off her skin. "You protect me," he said, stunned. She looked at him over her shoulder, her voice low and fierce. "We protect each other now." One by one, the attackers fell, retreating into the trees, their leader badly damaged, shouting commands as they vanished. When it was over, Kalira stood alone in the clearing, her chest rising and falling, eyes glowing bright like fire. Jace walked to her slowly, his voice quiet. "You don't belong in chains," he said. "You never did." She turned to him, her expression softening. "And you don't belong in war." She said, "You have the heart of a builder, not a killer." He laughed, tired. "Strange, coming from a warrior like you." She took his hand again, this time without fear. "There's a ship buried near the mountains," she said. "Ancient, but it might still fly." "We'll need it," Jace said. "They'll be back and not alone." Kalira nodded, her grip tightening. "Then we don't hide," she said. "We go to the stars before they block our sky, together." They walked through the jungle toward the mountain peaks, side by side, no longer hunter and prey, no longer stranger and soldier. Something had changed in both of them, and neither could go back now. Snow fell silently across the mountain ridge. The wind was thin and cold, but the sky above was wide and clear. Jace stood on a ledge, eyes fixed on a shape buried in the rock below. An ancient ship, covered in ice and moss, its surface scarred by time and forgotten wars. Behind him, Kalira approached quietly, her boots leaving no sound in the snow. Her energy had changed since the forge, her movements lighter, her presence stronger, but her eyes, those golden eyes, still looked at him the same way, like he mattered. "You were right," she said, standing beside him. "The ship's real." He nodded, his breath fogging the cold air. "You think it'll fly?" She tilted her head, listening to something beneath the silence. "It will," she said. "It wants to." They climbed down carefully, stepping across broken stone and frozen roots. Kalira placed her hand on the ship's hull, and the metal responded instantly, glowing faintly under her touch. The entrance opened with a low hiss, like a deep sigh waking from sleep. Inside, everything was dark at first, until Kalira moved through the corridor, her footsteps lighting the path behind her. "This was made by those who lived before," she said. "My people only found it, they never understood it." Jace followed her into the control chamber, where old symbols floated in the air. "Can you fly it?" he asked, looking around in awe. Kalira smiled gently. "Not alone." She reached for his hand and placed it over the central console. The lights grew brighter, the ship responding to both of them at once. A deep rumble passed through the floor, and the engines began to warm. Jace turned to her. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere they can't reach us," she replied. "Somewhere we can begin again." But before they could speak another word, a voice crackled through the ship's old comm system. "Commander Jace." It said, cold and sharp. "This is General Straven of Earth Command. We know you're alive. Surrender the alien and we'll spare your life." Kalira's smile faded. "They followed us this far," she whispered. "Even now." Jace stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Listen to me, General," he said clearly. "I'm not surrendering anyone." Static followed. Then a darker voice replied, "Then you're a traitor, and you'll die as one." Jace turned off the comms, the light from the panel casting, his face in pale blue. "They're not coming to talk," he said. "They're coming to erase us." Kalira walked to him, took his face in her hands, and looked into his eyes. "I gave you my trust when I had nothing," she said, her voice steady. "Now I give you something more." She placed his hand gently over her stomach, where a soft warmth pulsed beneath her armor. Jace froze, his eyes widening. "You're—" She nodded slowly. "You gave me freedom," she said. "Now I carry something born from that freedom." He didn't speak, just held her close. The truth hitting him like light. They weren't just running anymore. They were protecting something that belonged to both of them. The ship rumbled again, rising from the mountain slowly, snow and stone falling away as it lifted into the air. Outside, enemy ships were already closing in, black and cold and merciless. But Kalira stood at the helm. Like a queen without a crown, her hands glowing, her spirit unshaken, Jay stood beside her, no longer a soldier. No longer alone. He was hers and she was his. Together, they broke through the sky. The enemy tried to follow, but the ancient ship moved like a blade through the clouds, vanishing into the stars. What they left behind was war, betrayal, and pain. What they carried forward was something far stronger: hope, life, and the promise of a future no one else could write. And as the stars opened before them, Kalira whispered one last truth into the silence. Our child will never know cages.